Yeah, yeah.
Multitasking.
I'm back now. Hello, everybody. It's good to be back. Excuse my voice. I have a cough last night, so my voice has changed a little bit. But in case you don't know me, I'm Sarah M. as a co-host of this show. And I grew up in Cambodia. My life started out beautiful in my childhood. And then when I reached my college age, I went away from home and expecting a higher education and all that, but it didn't turn out that way. That fateful day came when the communist Khmer Rouge took over our country. They destroyed our life, destroyed our country. I was forced to work extremely hard and starved to death, almost dead, but God had mercy. He had compassion and he saved me. So I am so grateful that I'm still alive and I can share my story, that no matter how bad the things are, you do not need to give up. Never, never give up hope. So my survival, it just gives you hope. So I wrote my story in the book, How I Survived the Killing Field, and you can find it on my website, saraim.com, SARAIM.com. And I also do the speaking, not the same voice as I am speaking now. I have a better voice, but I'm sharing my story to inspire your audience. So reach out to me or Lee. We both are speakers. So that's all I want to share today. Back to you, Lee.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes. So that's my other half. And this half is, my name is Lee Tran. If you're new, I'm also a former refugee that came from the neighbor country of Cambodia, which is Vietnam. I was born in Vietnam, being an ethnic Chinese. So there's a lot more, another level of diaspora, you know, coming from that. And then in 1980, my family and I decided that, well, I didn't decide, my parents did, that they're going to cross the ocean and trying to find freedom. So with a massive amount of people trying to do the same thing. And we were lucky that we got through 4-time pirates out in the sea and 8 months in the refugees, and you know, starting a new life in a new country completely from the ground up. So it was quite a bit of life-turning experience. It wasn't like a regular teenager experience like most of people, but I have learned a lot through those rough times and have been successful in America. But underneath, there's still a lot of things that I want to tell. It took me almost 40 years in order to get my story out and be vulnerable in front of people and tell their story as a speaker and also as an author. So Shirley is a great resource. Have I known her earlier, you know, but don't worry, I have a second book coming. But the whole thing is compassionate and kindness. Mm-hmm. My family and I would not be able to survive the ordeal if we have not been through compassion and kindness of humankind, of people in this country who took us in and gave us love and protections and all the gifts that a human being could possibly give to another human being, which is love. Mm-hmm. So the theme of this month is more or less about compassion and kindness. So Shirley is, Shirley's got, I don't know Shirley before, I just met Shirley. And I have read her profile and it's so impressive. Shirley have helped and written almost over 80 books. Hello, 80, not 8, to other authors and help people to get their stories out. So, and on top of that, I just, you know, that that was enough for me to be impressed. I didn't even need to read any further, but I'm gonna let Shirley tell you, our audience, about who she is and how did she get here, and what kind of things she likes to do and who she helps particularly. So welcome so much, Shirley, for being on our show.
Thank you. I've actually published 80 books of my own and edited 100. So
oh my God, okay.
Probably a couple hundred altogether. But I've had a long career, and it's ironic that I'm talking to the two of you who are both refugees, because my entire career started because my family sponsored a family of refugees. So when I was 11, back in 1981, my father had served in Vietnam, and he had wanted to do something for all of the people that he saw during the war. And so they sponsored a brother and two sisters from Laos when I was 11 years old. And, you know, you have three people all of a sudden in your house that don't speak English, don't eat American food, have a completely different culture. And I immediately had a twin sister, because my sister was the sister we adopted was the same age as me. So, and I was the oldest. It was a whole life-changing dynamic. Wow. And their story was just so incredible. Seng Chung, the oldest, he was 23. He was the brother who brought the two sisters over. He swam across the Mekong River with a rowboat tied to his back to bring his sisters to safety. And they all stayed in the refugee camps in Thailand before they came and lived with us. And my parents, as a side note, ultimately ended up sponsoring at least 30 Laotians. It's funny, when my dad goes to a Laotian get together, he's like royalty, you know, because he's changed so many people's lives. It was just one of the most generous acts I've ever seen in my life. Anyways, living with them was so changing for me that I wrote an essay about it. I was 11 years old, didn't know anything about writing, but I did write an essay about their journey and how it had impacted our family. And my dad's secretary typed it up on the Royal Electric typewriter, because this was way before even electric typewriters like were normal. There was no internet, there was none of that. And I sent it into the editor of the local paper. And it was about the size of the Tampa Bay Times. They picked it up, decided to run with it, and came out and did a story on me and my family. And I decided that was it. I was going to be a writer from there on out. And that was my very first published piece. So
that is such a blessing. It's such a gift that you have given to the universe. I think writing is the most challenging thing, especially for people who do not speak the language.
Yes, yes.
And if you can able to help that is just so awesome. So you have written, I'm so sorry, 8 books of your own, not including, so you are also a ghostwriter and also an editor.
Yes, I started off as a journalist because I went into newspapers for a long time. And then I didn't like being that person that had to call families after somebody died or after they were killed in a hit and run. I called my high school history teacher's widow after the family vacation when he died. I just didn't like the person I had to be. So I went into magazines after that. Then I did some marketing work. And then eventually I ended up going to books, and I wanted to write stories that were impactful and happy. And so that's how I ended up in fiction. That was, I don't know, my first book came out in 2003. So that's when I started writing fiction. But all along, I'd always done nonfiction. I'd done journalist type work and biographies and things like that. And in the last few years, I've had a lot more demand for that. And so I work with people to build their books from the ground up, because like you said, it's not a skill that most people have, you know, just like I'm not going to sit down and do your taxes, you know, and I'm certainly not going to do calculus anytime soon. Right. But I can sit down with somebody and show them how to construct a book. And for the clients who need it, I do what I call collaborative ghostwriting. I don't like people that just give it to me and then leave and have me write it. I want them to be a part of the process. So when I work with a client and do ghostwriting, they talk to me and I write the chapter from that so that it sounds like them. If you pick up any of the books I've worked on, you can't tell which words are mine and which words are theirs, because I want to sound just like them. Yeah.
That is completely, oh my goodness. That is unbelievable that I will be able to connect with you, because it is really hard to find a person that will actually write in your voice. Yes. And, you know, each person come in as a different story, and you want to really representing them as closely as you can. So, so what type of story have been you written so far? Is that more of like a memoir, biography, you know, those story, you say
Or,
that you've written fiction before.
so my fiction has been romance and women's fiction primarily. I've done some young adult, but primarily because I wanted to write happy endings. So I started off in romance and then went into women's fiction. But my nonfiction has been, I had a few memoirs. They're mostly like how-to or self-help or things like that. Most of my clients are people who are trying to build additional revenue streams through their businesses by using their book for a platform for speaking and webinars and coaching and things like that, because I do all those things. So when I help them build the book, I look at what's your ultimate goal in terms of making money. And if it's speaking or whatever, then we build everything towards that goal.
So you cater also into the business front.
Yes.
Helping people.
Right.
That
because
is just awesome.
The real money in books is not on Amazon, unless you get really lucky. Anybody who's written a book knows that there's no real money in Amazon.
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
Because there's 15 million books on there and 30,000 loaded every month. So by the end of this year, there'll be another 17 million or something after COVID and stuff. So the money is, for me, even with all of those books, my money is in speaking and webinars and teaching. I make far more money doing that than I do on royalties, even with the backlist that I have, the substantial backlist.
Right. So can you tell us a little bit of a journey that how you work with your clients beside like interview? I mean, it's like you have a time frame process, you have a certain way that you guide them through, not just help them write, but something more of a like a story development or mental development, that type of things too.
So I have a kind of convoluted method with my clients, which I'm sure they think I'm crazy in the first meeting. I really just let them talk. I mean, because I'm looking for the story in there, and people don't tend to open up to you in the first 5 minutes. So I let them talk and talk and talk, and I'll ask them some questions, and that's where that journalism background comes in really handy. Right. But I really want to kind of hear what drives them, what makes them different. And I'll find somebody that, like I have a client who was former military, but she was in the military band. And she's like, well, that's not going to have any bearing on my book. But yes, it does, because you're used to being in a part of the military that is not respected and not seen as high of achievers as the rest of the military. And yet what you work on is helping people be high achievers. So we kind of feed that story in there about, how she was raised to be a perfectionist, and now she's teaching people how to live with imperfection and all of that. So I really just want them to talk to me and find out what makes them unique, because we all have a unique story and a unique set of circumstances that have happened to us and shaped us into the people that we are. And from there, I build the book based on what their ultimate goals are. So
that is just right on. That is just so very cool. And obviously you have been through many different stories and many different way of understanding, because I think each time each person tell a story, they bring the uniqueness of them out that the world don't know about it. Like a lot of my friends didn't know, what I've gone through until I have written the book. And I'm sure same thing with Sarah.
Right.
So that developing a deeper level of connection between you and the people that who's reading your book, because, from the surface, none of us look like, we were refugees
right.
back at the time. So what have been the most interesting story that you work on so far? Just
the one that was the most honorable, the biggest honor for me, I guess, was the story of Matt Dreamer. He lived here in Seminole. And ironically, his family lived many of the places that I had lived over the course of my life, but they moved like just before I moved to that place, or they had gone to the same church a few months before I had gone. But we kind of crossed paths many times without knowing it. He was killed in a hit and run a little over 3 years ago. And he had left behind journals and emails and things like that. His family came to me and said, we want to get his story out, but obviously he's not here to talk to you anymore. And I had never met him, but, I felt like he had a voice in all of his materials. And so I wrote it based on his journals and, his military records, and his, he had some stuff left over from therapy. He'd had some PTSD, and he was dealing with bipolar disorder. And it was just an extreme honor for that family to trust me with such a tragic story and use it to make an impact on other people in terms of how you can really find, his book is called Finding Level Ground, how you can kind of find level ground after you've been through a really traumatic event. And he was amazing. And so that's one of the ones that I always point to as the one I'm like most proud of, because it was really impactful to me as well.
Yeah, that is just so powerful, because at the end of the day, the story that, and I think, you know, a lot of PTSD people that have gone through trauma keep that PTSD to themselves.
Right.
They are not at the position that they want to share with the world because it's just too painful.
Right.
And usually, you know, when I wrote my book and I joined the writing group, that one gentleman told me that, you know, normally it take about 40 years for a PTSD person to review what they've been through. So like Holocaust victims and Vietnam vet and Korean vet, you know, like those things. So I really find it that with your help, I'm sure that a lot of people can actually get it out and be done with, because it's such a lift. It's such a place to just like, you can move on when you be able to gut out that story and let it be out there as an impact for other people to have hope.
And when they read it, they feel empowered and encouraged to share their own story. And I think it also brings understanding and compassion, you know, the theme of this month. Like when I read about or wrote about Matt's story and his battle with bipolar disorder, I didn't know that much about bipolar disorder at the time, but it taught me so much more compassion for people that struggle with that mental illness, because it's really difficult to conquer. And in general, I've worked on a lot of books that have stuff to do with mental illness, and it has just made me a more compassionate and kind person to people who suffer, because I've worked close with people that have been through that. Right. And so I think that story is the thing that can bind us. Like the first time I heard Sarah speak was several years ago, and I only knew the history through my Laotian family, what they had been through, but her story was just so impactful. And you looked at that experience of the people in those countries in such a different way. They went through things that the rest of us cannot even imagine. And at the time I was going through some pretty hard times in my own life. And I'm like, okay, if these people can get through this, I'm going to be able to survive this. To the individual person, their thing seems really, really big. But if they can put it in the context of what other people have gone through, it can empower them and give them the bravery to speak out and support other people.
Absolutely. I think that is one of the things that why, you know, Sarah and I both feel like, you know, something we don't want to do, but we have to do. I mean, under the climates for the last, I don't know, however long this country, I mean, there's a lot of divisions, there's a lot of hatred even sometimes toward the people that we don't really understand them. And I think the story would bring it out and connect people, human, even more, the compassion feeling.
Right.
So I want to thank you for doing what you do, helping others people have to find their voice, so even feel like comfortable to have a voice out there, because it can be very daunting thinking about writing a book. You know, I was slumped in like 3 months depression that have to go back through that period and relieve everything in order to write it. So be able to express it in a normal English that layman can understand. That is a task. That is definitely a task.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. So I want to thank you for that.
And that puts a face on the event. You know, it's different to read about, say, the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy, and then to meet somebody who was there and to hear their story behind it. You see the whole event in a different way. And hopefully through stories like yours and everybody else that shares like that, we can start seeing the people in the world in a different way, rather than just they're over there. Right. But that's what story can do. It has so much power if people can share theirs and be open about it and vulnerable.
Right. I mean, it's just like, to a lot of us, people, refugee is just the name refugee, just a number, you know, how many people have got to this country, blah, blah, blah. But if you heard a story, an individual story with the name and the face and the background, somehow you feel connected, more like a friend or somebody that you know, it's like, it is very, very different. So story does make a whole lot of difference. And putting out, obviously, not everyone going to agree. So you're going to have to be, have that thick face and saying that you're not writing for everyone.
Right. You're not going to please everybody, no matter who you are. And just staying true to what you're doing. Like when I write a book of my own, I have no idea who's going to read it on the other end. I'm working probably a year in advance of when it comes out. And I don't even, if I thought about the readers, I would panic because then I'd be trying to make everybody happy. But when I get that letter from somebody that says, I laughed my way through chemotherapy, you know, then I'm like, okay, this is why I'm doing this. And that's what I'm hoping to get across, making an impact in somebody's life, which you can do with fiction and in nonfiction. You can make an impact, whatever that happens to be. And when somebody sits down to write a book, one of the first things I ask them is, what is the impact you want to have? What's your purpose here? We're not just like throwing words on the page. Because when people read one of my books or a book that I've worked on, they're giving me hours of their life, you know, 4, 5, 6 hours. Those are hours you're not spending with your kids. You're not spending with your spouse or your job or anything else. You're giving them to me. And you're also giving me $20. And so that to me is a very big weight, that if people are giving me something so precious, and I think it's as I get older that I'm starting to realize how precious those hours are, then I better make it worth it that while, and better make it deliver something that changes their life in some way, shape, or form.
I think you are actually helping people build their legacy, because after all, at the end of the day, we're going to leave this earth. What have we done to leave the behind? And I think, you know, the book is probably not generating a lot of money. Like you said, you know, we know that we don't make money from the book. We make money from other things. But the book is where I find that my family appreciate it. My son understand it. And something that a part of me will, you know, and a part of Sarah will be leaving behind as, you know, in how many more years that we might not be here. So, so what is one advice you would give to other if they are hesitating about putting their story out there, even though they have a really good story that they might help change other people's lives? What would be things that you can convince them to write the book?
I think just getting it down, not thinking, because too many people think too far ahead, like, oh my God, what if somebody reads it? What if this happens? What if that happens? You don't know what's going to happen. You know, I've had books come out that did nothing, and I've had books come out that did very, very well. You've no idea what's going to happen when or if the book comes out. And I think writing the story alone is hugely therapeutic and helps you work through so many things. In general, it's kind of like a really long conversation with your therapist, right? And I think my advice to everybody when you want to write is you read a lot of what you want to write, and then you just write. You can't talk about it and have it manifest itself. You have to actually put the words on paper, and it will teach you more about yourself and your own story than anything else ever will. And if you only share it with your close family and friends, that's okay. You're still impacting those people. But I don't want to see people leave this earth without sharing the unique journey that they have taken, because we all have one that, you know, will help somebody else or impact their lives.
I think the biggest thing that people have come to me is about story that they want to share, but they hesitate because the character in the stories might not, you know, they were afraid they're going to hurt somebody in their family, their circle, their, you know, things that they don't want to reveal out in the open because of, you know, shame or embarrassment or that kind of thing. I have read a couple books that I always fall back into. I think The Glass Castle is one of them. The Educated, I think, you know, those are really a great true voice telling the story without denigrate the people you love. So what is your personal experience, or how do you go about? And there's people who say, oh, I want to write this, but I have to wait until so-and-so dies so I can write. So is that something that you can rectify that process or that thinking?
Well, part of what I do is, because a story, regardless of whether it's a memoir, how-to, whatever, it's a moment in time, right? And it's not every single thing you've been through. It's a moment in time and a lesson you want to get across.
I see.
And so sometimes I'll go in and I'll say, okay, so what's the lesson you want to get across? And whatever that is, like you can overcome really hard things. And then we'll say, but does this fit into that? Does that fit into that? Do you really need to message mention that aunt or that uncle, because, you know, they don't really figure into this overall story that you're telling. Even the most honest autobiographies out there leave a whole lot of stuff out, because there's people that you just don't want to hurt. And then you can always, some of my clients, we change the sex and the age, and we change it so you can't recognize that person. You can't say, oh, that must be his next door neighbor, because we want to protect people's privacy. And the person telling the story, this is their perception. It may not be the other person's perception.
Right.
So you can change it, and you can add the little disclaimer at the front that this is, you know, certain names and things have been changed to protect other people. And that allows you to move forward and not worry about that. A lot of times when I've written things that have been pretty personal, I've written them with the real names in there, and then I go back and I change it and take it out, because, you know, I don't want to be sued either.
Advice. Yeah.
But I go and write it just to get it out there. And then I look at, well, how much of this do I really need? And does it move my story forward?
And I guess I find out a lot of times probably not a great idea to write when you're angry or when you're in anger. Like you know, I think very much seem like a speaking thing. People say, if you can't heal yet, you can't tell the story, because then you're going to carry the tone of being angry.
True. Yes. Yeah. Although sometimes, you know, if you're angry or scared or whatever, writing helps you get through it. And maybe just journaling at that point is a good idea, just to start seeing the patterns and the things that you're going through. Right. I've been of course I write everything. I've been a huge proponent of journaling my whole life. And so when I get upset about something or anxious about something, I sit down and write about it to myself, and then kind of have a whole discussion with what are you really upset about, you know?
Well, there's people who are great in writing, and there's people who love just to talk. And I am just the other opposite. I can talk to the cow turn blue, but writing is really, really hard for me. Right. But so that's why I think people who can express them in word are coming so valuable to people who are lack of in that arena. Well,
we all have individual special skills, and that's why we're all put together on this earth. So, you know, I think it's great, you know, and the people that are brave enough to share their stories, I think it's great that they can find somebody that can work with them to get it out there.
Right. Do you want to say something, Sarah?
Yeah, I can relate to what Shirley answered the question. How do you protect your loved one from being recognized in the story? In my book, I changed the name. Yeah, I did not use the real name and all that. So nobody really know where these people are and how they relate to me.
Right. That's good.
I think memoir is pretty forgivable, because that is just writing in your own perspective, and you can pick and choose what you want to put it out there.
Right.
Yeah. So what is your most current project right now?
Right now I'm working on 4 books of my own that are due between here and the middle of next year, and I have 10 client books that I'm working on. So it's always a lot. I have a book coming out October 1st called Writing Compelling Fiction, and it's one of my it's my third nonfiction book of my own that is all about how to write compelling novels that really keep readers turning the pages. So, and that's really right up my alley, because I've done so many of those. And next year I'll have Writing Compelling Nonfiction, or some form of that, because I'm working on that second.
Where have you been?
I met Shirley 2 or 3 years ago, right?
Yeah, maybe, I think longer, because I heard you speak at I don't remember where it was, but Harborside, I think that's where I heard you speak one time. So a long time ago, but I don't think we really talked. But yeah, I met you at a networking thing a few years later.
Are you in Tampa Bay area also?
I'm in Clearwater. Yep.
Okay. Okay, not too far. So that is so exciting. And I just love the part that the more you write, the more you actually understanding and being compassionate to different situations that you encounter on. What's your most interest? Do you like nonfiction or fiction?
I like them both. To me, the nonfiction is a puzzle, because I kind of have all these pieces of somebody's life or their message that they want to get across. And it's kind of like they just dumped them all on the table and I've got to figure out how to assemble them. So I love the puzzle of nonfiction. Fiction is really fun because I get to make it all up and make it, you know, work the way that I want to. So I love them both. And I'm very blessed that my career allows me to do both during the day, because just one would get boring. I've always had a career with multiple eggs in different baskets. But yeah, they're all really fun. And I write different types of fiction. And then when I'm not working on a book, I work on books that are never going to get published, just to kind of write other things that, you know, kind of stretch my wings in new directions. So
do you also coaching other people writing, or do you just, yeah, you do?
Yes, I do coaching. I do hourly work, and I do coaching, and I do whatever people want, because I know from being an author myself that the writing process is different for everybody. And the amount of editing help or the amount of, you know, input they want in the beginning differs from person to person. And we all have a different creative process, and we all have a different process for sharing. And so I work with every client just a little bit differently based on what their process is.
That is great. Oh, wow. I have met a lot of writers, but I don't think I have met anyone that I am really clicking with you right now. I just felt like you have
Thank you.
Answer everything that a person would want to help out if they have a book that they hesitate about writing.
No, thank you.
So how do people find you?
Jumpstartcreativesolutions.com is my business website, and I'm on Facebook, Shirley Jump and Jumpstart Creative Solutions. And I also have my personal website for my fiction is shirleyjump.com. So I'm everywhere as either Shirley Jump or Jumpstart Creative Solutions. You can find me under either one. I'm on all the social media and everything. But I'm pretty easy. You can email me through any one of those or contact me, and I'm pretty flexible on all that. And I'm always happy to talk to somebody about the process and how I can work with them, or just point them in the right direction, you know.
Well, you have 10 clients that you're working with right now. What is the wait if somebody want to work with you? How long is the wait?
It depends on when they want the book done, honestly. Most of my clients take about a year to do a book. And so they're all in various stages of completion, because of course, not everybody started at the same time. So it's usually about a month to wait to start with me. And then now if you want the book in 4 months, that might be different. But yeah, most people take about a year. And so it's about a month, I get one client done, and then I bring in another one.
So one last question for me, unless Sarah has something that she want to ask. How do you get on those Today shows and Bravo TVs, and what get you there? What was the attention? I mean, besides 80 books and another some books.
You really have to have an interesting hook, and you have to be able to time it with what they're looking for right now. And it's just like success on Amazon, right? It's really hard to know. And if you're always trying to figure it out, then you're always chasing your own tail. Right. So you just try to lead with what part of your story you think appeals to the most amount of people, because people can relate to certain elements of everybody's story. Right. And that's what you lead with when you're going to target them. I used to be a PR person, and I used to write the stuff and then get the stuff. Yeah. And it's hard. You never know what's going to get picked up. Yeah.
I mean, if you have a good message and then you can't get to the ears of somebody important, that's pretty much, you know, it just kind of in the closet. But it's the other, you know, so many ways that you got to know how to market and how to put the hook out, so that's great. That's great. Well, I'm just speechless. I'm so honored. I'm so honored to have you here and share with our audience. And also, you know, it just fit into this theme of compassion and kindness from your family to the Laotian family or children or whoever that your parents sponsor. So totally international. I mean, it's just like we have Cambodian, Vietnamese, Chinese.
Right. It's a small world, isn't it? It's a very small world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I received that kind of kindness and compassion when I came as well.
Right. Yeah. And I think that makes a big difference. And my parents taught me a lot about understanding and appreciating where other people have been, and to, you know, welcome them, no matter how difficult it might be. Right. Like if you don't speak the same language. So I learned a great deal from my parents for what they did.
So what I have done, this is my book. It's called
Awesome.
I Did Not Miss the Boat.
Oh, nice.
And
like the
I have written a chapter about the people who were so kind to us when they sponsor us to America. So 2 weeks ago, my family returned to Minnesota, to this little tiny town where they sponsor, I mean, it's a 700-800 people town, and they sponsor our family. So I went back to that library. Before that, they didn't even have a library. They have a bookmobile. Now they have a library. So I went there and dedicated the book and do a book signing. I caught my second birthplace, and actually appropriately acknowledged the people who has been, you know, we were only there for 6 months, but they have made such an impact in my families, and we'll never forget the kindness. So I always want to return and do something that to express that, and then also pay it forward. Like I'm working with refugee in Malaysia right now. There's a group of refugees that they have been in Malaysia for indefinite amount of time. Some have been there from 5 to 10 years. So I'm kind of like advocate for them too. And then the COVID has been hitting hard. So there are just so many, once compassion and kindness are given out, they're contagious. They are spreading. And
in a good way.
Spreading. Yes. And it's all good because we really need that. I mean, it's just something that it just feels very right and fulfilling when we're able to do that. So I want to personally thank you for making a difference in many people's lives.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's been an honor. It really is. It's an honor for every single person that I work with, just the fact that they trust me with their story. I say that to pretty much everybody I work with.
Yes.
I'm very honored by that.
Yes. So. Well, thank you for being on here and spending your precious time with us.
Thank you.
So yeah, anything else you want to say, Sarah, before we close out?
I just want to to hear you say, how do you make the book more impactful when you write a book?
So it's really all about how you tell the story, because you want to hook people in the beginning and keep them reading. And that's kind of a strategy of not giving away the whole thing right away and making sure that every word you have in the book moves the book forward. There's nothing unnecessary in there. There's nothing that doesn't make the reader want to keep turning the pages. And you also start with where does the story start rather than all the backstory. A lot of times you'll see books where people go on and on and on for pages and pages and pages, that people are like, I didn't buy the book for this. I bought the book for this escape from prison part. And so you start where the story starts. And I think it's really all about just asking yourself, is this moving the book forward, or is it making it stall right where it is? And that's how you decide whether something stays or not. A lot of people get married to their words and they're like, I don't want to cut those words. I worked so hard to write them. But they're not oxygen. You can live without them, and you can make a better, leaner, stronger book if you cut them and make it stronger and more impactful all around.
Great advice. Great advice. Yeah, make them work for it, right?
Yes,
don't just give it all.
That's right. That's right.
Well, thank you everyone for listening, and thank you again, Shirley, for being on here. And hang around, and I'm going to close out. We'll see everybody on Thursday, which Sarah's going to interview me about my trip back to Minnesota. So I hope you stick around and come back on Thursday. Have a great night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.